Doesn't look like it. Nick.
And Tim, can you do the YouTube thing? Or do you need to make me host to do that?
Let me
Oh.
give me a shot.
I was saying Martel, but
Oh,
but you're also the expert as well.
I mean, I was gonna say everyone asked me, so I'll let Tim do that.
I can't do it.
All right, you want to make me co-host, or are you all right? You did, okay. Let's see. Tim, it's apps, right? I don't see that. I don't think I see the button on my side.
No, it's under the three dots that say more. You should see live on YouTube.
Yeah, I don't see it. I think it's because I'm not logged into Zoom.
That could be it.
Tim Davis, do you know how to do this?
Do you have the option to record on the bottom?
I do, yes.
If you click that, does it pop up and give you options to the cloud, everything like that? To YouTube, any of that?
I could pause, stop recording. That's it.
Okay, yeah, usually like Tim said, usually has three dots as well. I haven't
Yeah.
done it in a while, and I know they updated Zoom, so yeah. It can always be uploaded secondhand tomorrow if need be, so.
Try.
It looks like it's recording, Andrew, at least.
Yeah, we're recording, so they'll just
Okay.
load it.
Yeah, I can
Nobody
make a
can
note.
watch it.
Yeah, I could do that for you tomorrow.
All right, thanks. All right, I will call the advisory committee meeting to order at 7:33 p.m. All right, welcome everybody. Let me pull up my agenda. All right, so I think Tim, you are first. I put you right on the beginning to.
Okay.
So we asked, we had talked about in our previous meeting, just kind of doing a review and a discussion with the rec on the revolving account, just kind of understanding where they're at, after we did the emergency increase last year, to 410,000. Then I'll kind of kick it over to you, Tim, to kind of go through the analysis you and Don did with Carla and everything that's going on.
Sure. Yeah. Just real quick. So we're joined tonight, Don Dumont. He's part of the Recreation Commission on our team. And he has been at my side for those conversations as well. So Don, if you don't mind, I'll kick it to you if you want to kind of dive into the conversation. I can fill in pieces as we go.
Sure. We did have a couple of summary slides to hit a couple of talking points. Is there someone who can release the screen share for me or to me? Or did I ask for too much power?
So I think I promoted him to attendee.
All right, then we're back.
Sorry, Don, I think I clicked the wrong button. Tim, can you do it? Because I don't think I have really like the same host.
I can make him a co-host.
Yeah, right now all I can do is just make him an attendee.
All right, you should have the power now.
And I do, thank you.
You're welcome.
If you could confirm that you can see that slide, that'd be appreciated.
Perfect.
Excellent. So just a quick, this is, I gave a similar presentation on this prior to Tim being here. This was probably back in 2018. So I dusted off a couple of the slides we had because there was some good content in there just to give it a little bit of background. So just at a high level, we kind of break up sort of what Tim and his team do into a couple different buckets. So the bucket we're going to talk about tonight is the recreation programs. Those are the ones that are handled through the recreation program revolver fund. And so you can see sort of the programs that go through that are the RAP programs. There's some town-wide programs that we run through there that are not tied to after school. There's a summer camp, which this summer was held at Woodward. And then there's some other programs for Heritage Day and the Halloween party that go through there as well. The other activities that Tim oversees go into different areas. So the overall recreation department manages all of our fields. They handle things like summer nights and the gobble wobble. And that's largely derived from their budget that go the couple of head count they have. And then donations and whatnot that come in for like summer nights, for example. And then we also have the 9/11 Memorial Field Fund, which is also a revolving fund that's set up to capture the fees for that field, to pay for the maintenance, and then to ultimately fund the bond payments. The other source of funds and expenses that sort of that fall through recreation or sort of overseen by recreation are the fields themselves, the grass fields. Those fees are contributed to the general fund, and the costs to maintain the grass, mowing, and things like that are funded out of the DPW as well. So you've got that sort of matched up in the general fund. So just to give a high level of sort of the different buckets of what Tim oversees and how they get their funding. So we could, as we go through, if there are any questions, we can deep dive any of these, but just to give you that overview. So from a recreation program perspective, so these are the items that flow through the revolving fund that we're talking about tonight. So Tim and his team sort of manage that overall at a high level to make sure that we understand what programs are going in there, what should be the rates, what programs are doing well, which ones need to be refreshed or what needs to be added based on demand. They're all subject, the revolving fund itself is subject to Chapter 44, Section 53.5, E.5. Same section that governs, I believe there are 9 other revolving funds in town. So the 10 of them, I believe, are all subject to this particular section of the code. The fees that are collected from the participants flow into the revolving fund, and the expenses, the direct expenses to support those programs flow out of that fund. So there's a matching of the proceeds with the expenses. There is an amount set each year as part of the annual town meeting as to what the anticipated expenses will be for the year. That's usually based on a forecast. How many participants do we expect at camp? How many RAP programs will run? What other items will go? So that's basically a best sort of forecast of what we think will happen in the coming 12 months, how much revenue will come in, and how many expenses what will be the expenses to support those programs. And then as part of some of the things that we have to follow as part of 53E, you can't exceed the amount of money you have in the fund from a spending perspective. So it's imperative that we always make sure we've got a cash balance in there. Otherwise, you can't actually contract or expend funds. If there is cash that's in there and it earns interest, that money reverts to the town through the general funds. So that is, if there was any questions on that, that's where that flows. And then by having this segregated, there are no taxpayer funds or any other town funds that cover things like camp or stuff like that. It's basically a whole self-funding or enclosed sort of program from that perspective. So again, just sort of a bit of an overview. So as I mentioned, the rules require that there's always sufficient cash to go in there. Tim does a good job of monitoring sort of how things are going during the course of the year, just to make sure that we're in good shape. The challenge becomes it's sort of a timing thing. So for those of you who are familiar with accounting and cash flows and whatnot, sometimes the cash comes in first and then you pay your expenses, and other times you might have to make a deposit to, say, a secure vendor, and you may not collect the fees from customers or participants until later in the process. So there are times where, for example, in the spring, we collect all of the camp fees ahead of time. The bulk of those fees are used to pay the labor at the camp, which are the counselors and the directors. Those are obviously paid as you go during the course of July and August. So you see an influx of sort of cash, and then you see that go out over the course of the summertime. Generally, as sort of a rule of thumb, we're trying to keep enough working capital. We want to have more cash than expenses or liabilities in there, so that we never run afoul of the sort of the legal requirements as far as our disbursements are concerned. So there's a sort of a, think of that as like having 90 days of expenditures on hand at a given point to make sure that you never run into trouble. We also keep in the fund anything that's planned for spend. So for example, we're replacing or augmenting one of our vans. As any of you would know, so sourcing any sort of motor vehicle at this point is challenging. And so we've had that money sitting there waiting for a good opportunistic situation to grab a van. We usually keep it balanced to cover things like smaller projects, whether it's a replacement. We acquired a tent for some of the functions. We helped cover some costs to finish up the pickleball courts recently. We kind of keep that in there as well. And then as sort of like last ditch reserve, like to have a little bit of money in the event of disruptions to revenue flows, right? So Triple E from a couple of years ago really shut down some of our operations. And then obviously the impact of COVID was fairly substantial as far as having expenditures exceed inbound money for that particular period. So that kind of gets you to, I believe I can't remember the number you quoted earlier, Andrew, but it was about a $400,000 balance. That was probably a peak balance. The balance now is much less than that as a result of having gone through now and paid all the camp counselors and have moved on into different programs for the course of the year. So I'm going to pause there because I know the revolving fund was sort of the question, but hopefully that presents at least a reasonable overview. And Tim, please hop in and augment anything I may have missed or misspoken.
Sorry. No, I think that was a good overview. I'm more curious on the questions, so hopefully answer any questions you have, ideas that maybe misconceptions, anything like that we can try to clear up for you today.
So Tim, do you know what the current balance is? I think the last one I had was year end was like 436.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect illustration of what we're saying. So let me bring it up. Right now where we're at, because we came out of that summer season, it kind of goes from the spring. February is when our big influx is because of summer camp, and then we're taking in funds in February that we're not spending until August. So where we're at right now is about 240 is where we are right now.
Okay. And that's kind of like your low balance, would you say?
I wouldn't say that. I mean, again, we're through a registration cycle because of after school. So again, there's a buildup there. So in about 3 or 4 weeks, that's gonna go back down. So realistically, we're probably closer to sub 200 if everything was paid out and then we were stale as of right now.
Okay. And do you have an estimated what your low would be because the van fund is still in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if the van's out, it's.
So yeah, we take the van out, we're trending more towards 100.
Okay. I think we've talked about this before, but the overarching question is there enough in here to help the general fund with the rec salaries and the oversight, the management of this rec programs, right? And some of the staff that's paid out of the general fund that also works on the programs, or any capital items or 9/11 field additional bond parts, right? So that's usually the outstanding question is how much is too much to leave in the account. And we've talked about it before, but I'm not a huge proponent of doing, like purchasing the van with those funds. I think it would be much more sense to use the general fund and capital plan, et cetera. But why don't we open it up to the rest of the committee for any questions? I'll start with you, Howard.
Always first. No, thank you for the presentation. I guess my big question is the van as well, but and just same question. Do we have enough funds in here? It sounds like there's plenty to keep operating. I just want to make sure you agree with that. So
Yeah, from my perspective, sort of monitoring what Tim does overall, there's again, what's challenging is as you monitor it during the course of the year, the ebbs and flows based on timing, right? So we think there's enough funds in there for the van. We think the van's appropriate, given that it's used for these programs and sort of a direct expense and sort of in line with the expectations. The allocation of full-time overhead right now, I think you'd have to look at the code for the town to see if that's actually something that's allowable in the revolvers right now. I don't believe it is in Southborough, given how it's what I've read in the town annual town meeting. But the van itself, I think, makes sense. Where there could be some opportunity, I think, if you want to match up direct expenses, and I think that's a good hunt, is I've been talking to our finance team in town. There's like a gas card that goes with that van or would go with the van. Assigning that gas card to the revolving fund, that's a direct cost. That kind of expense is probably highly worthy of sort of investigating, and certainly I think would fit within the profile of the spending that we have here. But at least that's my 2 cents on it based on what I've seen over the last few years.
All right, Howard, all set?
set.
All right, I'll go to Marcy next.
Thank you both for presenting. I think this is a great extension of what you already prepared us for last year. So I feel like I understand this a lot better than I did then. I had very similar questions to Andrew and Howard, and think that the van would be probably a great idea to come out of this fund if it's permissible. So I don't really have any other specific questions this evening. Thank you.
Just on the question of the permissibility, this to be the second van that we've put
Second
through
van.
here. So
Okay.
we've previously put a van through, so we definitely have precedent for the treatment,
Okay.
and it fits as sort of a direct expense of the programs. It's used, if I'm not mistaken, Tim, it's used for the ski ward, and it's used to get kids to maybe the pottery.
Right. It's all after school programs, whether in town or out of town, weekend trips, day trips, things of that nature. So, like you said, directly tied.
All right, Tim? The other Tim?
Yeah, I'm sorry if I missed it. Was the capital planning group involved in the discussions about the second van?
Yep, it's reflected on their capital plan with the funding mechanism being revolving.
Thank you. That was my only question.
Yeah, Tim's done a good job of regardless of the source of the funds, we've been communicating with the capital team on anything that fits those parameters. So, and then try and outline sort of what makes sense for where, but he's been pretty closely engaged with that group to keep them in the loop.
And Eric?
Hey, sorry guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep, awesome. Really appreciate the presentation, very informative. I have no questions beyond what the other committee members have asked.
All right, and Adam, I'm not sure if you're back on.
Yeah, yes, I am. Sorry, I'm in the car, so I have been listening, but haven't been able to look at the slides as you've been presenting it. But I don't have any follow-up questions at this point, but I appreciate the presentation and all the information.
All right, great. So I'd say, Tim, Don, as we go through the next budget, cycle, let's look at future expenditures, make sure we have the right limit, and see whether or not there's anything else we can absorb into here to help out the other side of the equation.
Makes sense.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Don.
Thank you.
All right. Let me do the minutes from 7:13 real quick. Did anyone have any edits?
I think I sent you that potentially missing parentheses. That
Oh,
was
yeah.
a
Yeah,
very
so
minor one.
that was,
I'm sorry, Tim, where was that?
so it was, sorry. I was looking at the wrong email.
Well, it was Tim's question.
There was an edit Tim had.
I don't know if it was line 59. There's a parenthesis there, like a.
I think that was that one.
That
I'm not
sounds
sure.
right.
Okay.
Okay, so line 59, missing paren there, Claire.
Okay, I can fix that.
Yep.
Uh,
Oh,
While
just
you're there,
minor
while you're there, I had one for line 61. Just change it from new sound system to new video conference system.
Okay,
I think that's the only edit I had. Anybody else? No? All right. Do we have a motion to approve the July 13 minutes as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right, roll call. Howard,
Aye.
Marcy,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Adam,
Aye.
and Andrew is aye. Thank you, Claire. Those are great minutes.
thanks, guys.
Okay, that was quick. Chair report. NERI committee, we did meet to go over some of the next steps with MSBA, but that's kind of just the same current process, not much to really report there. Possible reserve fund interdepartmental transfers. In the year-end update from Carla and Brian, there's a possible FEMA denial coming for Board of Health vaccination expenses of about $42K for the Board of Health director and nurse working the vaccine clinic. So we won't know yet whether or not that was denied, but that could end up coming back to us or having to find another alternate source for that. The public safety radio shelter, which I think I forwarded some emails around. For now, that's going to be paid out of the police budget, as they're going to have a favorability due to Chief Bolus, not being paid. So for right now, that we think they can be absorbed into the police budget, but we'll probably track that and see if there's any impact on the police budget at the end of the year. Maybe we need to do a reserve fund or interdepartmental, but nothing crazy. That's about $17K. In terms of year-end figures, it looked pretty good for the year. I'll just kind of touch on the ones, we obviously know what we did for the reserve fund, but we had a year-end balance of almost 100,000. IT had a big turn back of about 80,000, which makes sense because they didn't have the new hire onboarded. Key ones. Revenue total fiscal year general fund revenue was about $10,000 less for the year, so essentially flat, which is good. Ambulance fund revenue had a nice year-over-year increase. That's starting to pick up, which is good and bad. It's nice to have the revenue bad that we're having residents using an ambulance. Building fees are down about 90,000, but mostly because there was big permits done last year, like the new dorm at St. Mark's. But it's still over our usual trend. This year we exceeded the tax rate estimated revenue about 1.07 million, and last year was close to that, about 1.1. So right about on par with the kind of beating our estimated revenue like we usually do. The only other pretty sizable turn back, DPW had a turn back of about 33,000, even though they mostly due to snow removal was lower. They did overspend their engineering to kind of get some things done, to get some shovel ready information ready. So I think we're in pretty good shape there. And there's kind of a general theme that will carry into the budget of things costing more and certain line items getting over because of cost of goods increasing, on things like our service supplies and office supplies and things like that nature. So something we'll have to definitely keep an eye on for when we do the budget. We're still waiting on the final free cash. The split may be higher than the 12% that we forecasted. I don't know what the final number is, but I think it's it's tight. So once we know what the final year-over-year increase will be after everything's settled, we can discuss that. Any questions on that piece? All right.
Hey, Andrew, sorry. The first thing you were mentioning, there was something related to like vaccinations. Yep. I missed what you were saying there. Do you mind just giving the note version on that one?
So I believe, I can't remember the time period, but I think it might even be going back to 2021. They put through to FEMA some salary costs for the Board of Health director and nurse for the administration, the working of that regional vaccination clinic. And that hasn't been approved yet. And, they had already denied the one that we did the reserve fund transfer for at the end of last year. So Carla was a little wary that one might get denied again. It's a different time period, but, so something just to be aware that may need a reserve fund or an interdepartmental to cover that cost.
Got it. So what's the time, or I guess what's the next step on that then?
I think we just wait. FEMA does everything kind of pre-approved. So once it's approved by FEMA, it's good. It's not like CARES where you go for it and then they might come back later. So right now it's just sitting in basically in a suspense account waiting for the approval, and the funds to hit. But if it doesn't come in, we'll have to figure out how to pay for it.
Okay.
Did FEMA give a reason why they might deny it or what the problem is?
I think the problem was kind of what we did with the budget, where we said we're not going to budget this role and expense it as an unbudgeted position, but the person was under contract, and I don't know. I don't think they like that, and we didn't put it through CARES, which probably would have been approved, but we went to FEMA first. So it's a little bit of a shell game.
Thanks.
Yep. Any other questions? All right. Now let's get into the meat of the warrant. So can everybody, let me see if I can share this. Everybody see my screen?
Yes.
All
Yes.
right. So this is, sorry for all the versions. I think this is the final version. The one that Mark just sent. So tonight, who wants to do, I can make the motions if somebody wants to, do a so moved, and who wants to do a second? Just to make it easier.
I can still move it.
All right. And Marcy,
And
can you be
I can second.
the designated seconder? Okay.
Yep.
And so we're talking about the tree bylaw. Let me bring over Mimi and all right. Hey, Mimi.
Hi, how is everyone?
Oh, great. Thanks. How are you?
Very good, thanks.
Thank you for joining us a little bit last minute, but we literally, this is hot off the press. We just got the warrant about a couple hours ago. All right. So we've all obviously, so Mimi, can you talk, has anything really changed since the last time we saw this at Springtown meeting? It's pretty much the same. We just moved it to this town meeting, right? Or is there any adjustments?
There have been some adjustments.
Okay.
There was the knowledge of the special act that was passed that made the select board the tree warden. So that has been reflected in the bylaw.
Okay.
There's been clarity on like who would have to pay for application fees if requesting a tree removal, to make clear that a tree in the town right away that's, you know, a hazard or dying, the person reporting would not have to pay application fees. But if they wanted a tree down because they don't like maple trees, then they would have to pay those
Gotcha.
application fees.
Okay.
And we made some changes to the utilities based on a long conversation at the last planning board meeting with National Grid. But other than that, it's pretty much the same.
Okay, great. I think for me, the only question I had is the same, it's kind of the same question I had, you know, last year, was the in the jurisdiction, the permit that you would need to do construction demolition activities. Is that covered underneath? Let me just go to the section, sorry. So they have this section here that it's if any public shade tree may be impacted under the jurisdiction of, you know, all these different areas. Is this portion like is this permit here required for for engaging in construction or demolition? Is this covered underneath this kind of saying like only if you're under the jurisdiction of the town building department, planning board, zoning, or other town department or board? Or is it any person that might be doing any kind of, you know, demolition activities within the drip line? Like I'm trying to think of something simple, right? If you're, I don't know, planting some bulbs in your yard that's under the drip line, but that's not really under the jurisdiction of the building department or planning board or ZBA or other town department or board, right?
So I don't think that planting bulbs would be considered construction or demolition. And they're separate. So if you want to put in a stone wall and dig out a portion of the root system under the drip line, you would need a permit to do that. That would be considered construction or demolition.
Even if the stone wall was under the, whatever it is, isn't it? And under 2 feet, you don't need a building permit or something small?
So they're completely separate. There's the building conservation planning board under section 3, and then section 5 is separate. So it's not necessarily that you need a building permit if you're going to be
Correct.
excavating under the drip line.
But I mean, for me, that my issue I had before was the definition of construction or demolition, right? If bulbs isn't, but putting in a 1 foot retaining wall or, you know, edging is, right? Where is that? And then if somebody does it and doesn't get a permit, but doesn't kill the tree, what is the recourse?
So the fees and fines will be propagated by the tree warden designee with the approval of the select board and the planning board. So those have not been set.
Okay.
If there's a question, shoot Chris Leroy an email and he'll say, no, bulbs are not construction. Or yes, let me take a look.
Yeah. I'm thinking even more people, you know, I think we agree that bulbs are not, right? But then it's the interpretation portion of it. And more after the fact, it's more like, would somebody have to remove whatever they did because they didn't have a permit? Or is it simply failure to get a permit but not kill the tree? You know, that fine might be coming up in the future, but it might be a simple fine, right? Okay, it's a $50 fine or $100 fine, right? Something that isn't catastrophic to somebody. If the tree didn't get damaged, but technically they didn't get a permit when they knew they should have, it's a smaller fine. Does that make sense?
That seems to be common sense.
Okay. The other question I had was enforcement. For each act causing damage to a separate tree shall constitute a separate offense. Would it be each like violating act? I don't know. I don't know if you need to. I mean, we're gonna pass that point, but it's just kind of.
So if you remove 3 public shade trees, it would be 3 separate offenses.
Yes. Well, I was thinking more of like the small trees that you had that are under the whatever the inch thick, which I guess wouldn't be an offense. So the act.
So if
wouldn't be
they're under 1.5 inches, they're not considered public shade
correct.
trees.
Okay. All right. I think it works. It's just I don't know. The wording just was a little funny to me, but I think it works. Yeah. Okay. I think that's all I have for now. Why don't we switch the order? How about Eric this time?
Sorry, guys, I have too many screens up. I'm trying to read my version of well, not my version, the bylaw on my computer. Anyway, sorry. So I think this all makes sense. Andrew, is in line with your questions. Mimi, I guess the one question I just want to clarify, make sure I'm totally clear on the scenario where there's a public shade tree where the drip line crosses over my property line, for example, right? If I want to essentially disturb the ground within that drip line on my property, but within my drip line, I would need to consult the tree warden or the tree warden designee before completing that effort. Is that correct? Because if I'm disturbing the ground or digging, like I have a chance of hurting the roots of the tree. Is that accurate, or am I missing something? I think that was my concerns the last time we had this conversation of just like being maybe potentially too vague to the homeowner where there is that crossover. But forgive me if I'm missing something here.
So you were correct. The reason that the drip line is called out is because that's where the root system is. That's where the feeder roots are that feed the tree. That's where the stability roots are that hold the tree up. So if you, and the question, what's trying to be prevented is the destruction of that root system. planting grass or planting bulbs is not going to destroy the root system, so that's not a concern. But if there's a public shade tree and part of the drip line is on your property, then if you were to do demolition or construction activity, you would have to speak with Chris Leroy.
Okay, and thank you for that. And I guess a follow-up question here, and I don't know if you can answer this or not, or if there's a better question for Chris, but again, just building on this example. So like, I want to replace a fence post, or I want to put up a fence, right? I want to dig a 6-inch hole, wide diameter hole down, whatever. What does that process look like if I'm within the drip line? Like, are they going to come in and do like a very careful survey of where those roots are? Is it just going to be a nope, there could be roots there, so you can't dig? I'm trying to get some sort of sense of how limiting this is, right? Or how much, not wiggle room, but reasonable consideration there is for that balancing. I don't want to hurt a public shade tree. That's the last thing I'd want to do. But also, I wouldn't want to not be able to touch that section of my property because there's a tree there, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I'm not an arborist and I don't play one on TV, but I would think that Chris would come and say, well, if you put the post here and did this, it would kind of mitigate the damage and would figure out a way for you to be able to do what you want to do. And what we're trying to do is we have not taken care of our public shade trees in Southborough at all, as is evidenced by the hearing we just had to remove 100 dead trees that have been listed on reports for years and years. So we're just trying to value our public shade trees, get people to understand, what they are and what they offer, and try and take care of them.
Absolutely, and very supportive of that mission. Again, I always just trying to sort of balance both sides and think about what's reasonable for property owners as well who pay the bills. Last question here, and again, forgive me if this is a stupid question. Is there in this bylaw, is there a current response time that the designee has to respond to, like a permit? So hey, I want to know if I can dig a fence post, I'm within a drip line. Is there defined they have to respond within 14 days, 30 days, or is it just based on their availability?
So that's not defined in the bylaw, but we can certainly define it in the regulations, and I'll make a note of that so that it does. But I know from previous contact with Chris, he's pretty prompt.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I saw some good call outs in terms of like, if there's a appeal request to the select board, right, how long they have to respond to, et cetera. So just thinking about that, I think it would be nice to have that defined for the taxpayer, so to speak, or anyone applying for the permit. But thank you for answering. No further questions.
Thank you.
And maybe we can add, I don't remember what you call it in planning board ZBA language, but condition, the automatic approval if it's not responded to in a certain period of time. Can't remember what that's called.
Oh, okay. So if you don't hear back within a certain amount of time, you can do what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Is that what? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, just being clear, Andrew, I passed. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Why don't we go to Tim?
I have no questions. Thank you.
All right. Marcy?
Hi, Mimi. Hi, everybody.
Marcy.
Have a few questions for you by section. I think, Andrew, you covered jurisdiction with one exception. I have a question. This tree bylaw would or would not apply to Main Street, Marlborough Road, Corderville Road, Boston Road. Is that right? Because they're numbered roads, or
So
it does apply.
it would apply. There's still public shade trees, but those are not scenic roads, so that would not
Okay.
be under the jurisdiction of the planning board.
Okay. All right, that was one. You've talked about fees that aren't published, so that was another question. Thank you for trying to answer that. I think that was on the process to request section G. That was a question I had. Section J, tree replacement. I don't know if planning board is a sponsor for this article, is given a lot of consideration to the cost of tree replacement. So, you know, the replacement trees shall be a straight native species deemed advisable by the tree warden, and then an inch by inch replacement. Replacement shall be at least 3 inches in diameter, which if you look some of this up, it could cost several $1,000s to take down a tree and replace it. And I understand that wouldn't necessarily be replaced in the same spot. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So I guess one of the questions I have is, any of the funds from that going to be used to support DPW actually taking care of the trees that you'd pay to have replaced? Because if you take a look around, walk down Main Street, you know, some of these trees have been replaced, but they're not very well cared for. So is there any part of the fees here going to be related to actual care of the trees? I mean, I would hate to imagine that I spend several $1,000s replacing a shade tree if I had to have one taken down, God forbid, and then it was, you know, dead within a year or so. I don't know if that's been given any thought.
Sure, a couple of things. So the inch by inch replacement is one of the alternatives that may be included. So it depends on the situation of what the tree warden and the planning board would require as far as tree replacement.
Okay, so
So
it's
there's
not
so there's
necessarily.
flexibility there.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
and the fees go into the general fund. We had originally had proposed a revolving fund for the fees to go into, and heard back from many people in town with financial backgrounds that they hate revolving funds. So we got rid of the revolving fund. In that town meeting, we're going to have a standing fund, kind of like facilities has, which a third of the fund will be used for tree removal, a third for maintenance, and a third for replanting.
I guess the last question I had, and I forget which section it is now. If I, as a private citizen, want to have a tree taken down, I have to do the application process, but the town does not, or the town does, but they don't have to pay fees. Is that right? So just for clarity, the town does have to apply just like we would for.
Yeah, yes.
So, okay. All right.
But the fees are waived for the town,
Right.
but they have to apply so that the hearing process can go forward.
Okay.
And it depends on why somebody would require a public shade tree removal. If it meets certain criteria, if it's diseased, it's a hazard. The citizen does not have to pay fees.
Right. Okay. Those were all my questions. Thank you, Mimi.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go to Howard.
Hey, Mimi.
Hello.
Majority of my questions have all been brought up, but I want to state them again. The big thing was timing on any other major process. Something comes in front of the planning board, you have a certain amount of time to respond and act on that. There's no language whatsoever on this from the time you do a permit to the time that the tree is actually taken care of. You've said it yourself, we're about to do 150 trees that have been sitting there for years. As a homeowner, I would be incredibly upset. And I think that, for example, some of the ones on Flag Road that have been dead and hazards on Flag Road that need to come down that just haven't would be incredibly frustrating. I strongly recommend somewhere there's a timing process put in here that not only to respond, but to have the requirement to have the public hearing in a certain amount of time, whether that becomes monthly or bi-monthly or whatever it is. But I think there needs to be something to hold the process together and continue it moving forward. as well.
So there will be a policy that the select board and the planning board have been working on, and that those that last consolidated hearing followed that policy. In the trees that, I agree with you, those trees have been sitting there forever, but there was, nothing was done. There was no hearing.
And that's my
or
point,
anything,
is there needs
so-
to be something put in place that you must, if a resident makes a request, you have to have that, just like if a developer puts in a request to ZBA or something, the ZBA has a certain amount of time to respond and hold a hearing on that request. You need something similar to that in this bylaw for these hearings. in
So
my
that,
opinion.
so that will be in the policy, and that's, there will be hearings quarterly. So any requests that come in will be heard quarterly. And then there are all kinds of timing requirements on the public hearing process from when you file an application to when the hearing is held. And those are all Mass General law.
Okay. And then one more clarification. So if I have a tree on my property that's in the right of way and is determined to be sick and needs to come down, and I'm not paying for that, who's responsible for putting up the replacement tree and where? Does it have to be on my property, or where does that replacement tree go?
So just to clarify, if it's a public shade tree, it's not on private property, it's in the public right of way. And if a tree comes down because it's sick and there needs to be a replacement, if the right of way in front of your house is an appropriate place for it, then it could be replaced there. If something about that right of way is poisonous to trees, and that's why your tree was sick, a replacement tree will be put someplace else.
And does the homeowner have any say of where it goes, or is that the town's right away? They can do it anywhere they want?
Oh, if you want the replacement somewhere within the right of way in front of your house, I don't think, unless there's some problem with that.
I guess my point, I was thinking the other way is the tree is sick, it's dying. I have it removed and I don't want anything else there. They can insist that they replace it. They're going to find somewhere else to put that tree. And is there a negotiation there, or does the tree warden have ultimate say, and they can put a tree, right in the front of my house in the right of way, and I have nothing to say about it?
Well, so there's always a negotiation, and the town always listens to the residents. But by right, the public right of way is town property.
Okay. I'm just thinking of what's going to come up when you try to bring this to town meeting. So,
No, I appreciate it.
People care about what's in front of their house and not, and there are some very strong opinions from some people. So, and this is a very complete proposed bylaw, and it doesn't, good or bad, it doesn't leave much room for interpretation, and that may turn some people off.
So, but just to be clear, this follows Mass General Law, Chapter 87 and Chapter 40, Section 15C, which we are required to comply with, which we haven't.
Oh,
So that just,
I'm not objecting to it. I'm just noting that it's, when it comes, we've all seen town meeting that some strong opinions may not care for how specific it is, and that whether it's another law you're following or not, I'm just, that's just my opinion of what I've seen at town meeting. So.
Thank you.
All right, I think Adam, I think you're the last one.
Good evening, Mimi. Nice
Hello.
to meet you. Actually, the way that line of questions ended was what I was curious about is this bylaw basically just re-establishing what we should already be doing in the first place?
So this brings Mass General Law, Chapter 87 and 4015C closer to home. And it outlines a clear process for which we can comply with those two laws.
Okay, and what would be the repercussion or consequence for the town if we didn't approve this bylaw? If we were not showing a good faith effort to comply with that law?
I think
Well-
go ahead, Mimi.
So we can be sued and fined like we can now.
Okay,
And I don't think it's happened, and we'll continue to not take care of our trees and continue to have residents complaining about gazillions of dead trees on their street that nothing's being done about.
okay. And so the complaining about the trees that are in bad shape or dead, can you explain how this bylaw will help more efficiently prevent that from happening? Is it because people are doing things that they would not do if this was in place?
Well, so trees have not been a priority. So,
To citizens of, is it, I guess I'm trying to understand, I'm with you on the mission, trying to understand how this bylaw accomplishes that, and if there's a lack of understanding of a law that maybe already exists that we should be complying with, or if there's people doing things that they shouldn't be doing that they wouldn't do because this is now going to be a bylaw. I'm trying to understand how this helps resurrect the problem.
so initially, I think there was a lack of a clear understanding that these laws were in existence and we were required to comply with them. Several years ago, we became a tree city, which requires us to comply with these laws. And this is just taking that one step forward to clarify the process for which we need to comply with those laws. And this clearly lays out how things should be done and how if someone calls in with there's a clear process when someone calls in with a complaint and how it's handled, and quarterly hearings and how the hearings are held is all laid out in either this bylaw, the regulations, or the policy.
And is there, maybe it's in the bylaw already, is there any obligation for the tree warden to do some outreach over any cadence of time to ensure that people understand this and are aware of it? That's what I guess, having this is great, but if people don't know about it, I'm not sure it's solving the problem that we all probably agree is worth solving. Is there any value, if it's not already in here, of putting that, obligating the tree warden to do some of that outreach versus assuming people will know in town that this is something they should be following?
It's not obligated in the law, can definitely go into the regulations.
So Adam, just to elaborate on one of your previous questions, Chapter 87 exists today. This bylaw goes further than Chapter 87 currently is written. So without this, we would still have Chapter 87. We would still have to follow that. If you cut down a public shade tree, you're fine. You can be fined up to $500. But the additional language and the additional parts of here, replacement of trees and native straight species, et cetera, is an addition to that. So I just want to clarify that.
Right, but when somebody gets fined, are they getting fined knowing that they're going to get fined, or do they not care that they're going to get fined? I guess back to my question really is, the purpose of this is to solve a problem and to maintain healthier trees within the town. Is there anything else that we should think about adding to this, I suppose, that helps reinforce these bylaws so that people actually follow them. You've got fines in here, but I guess if I don't know that this even exists, I'm going to do the things that I was doing anyway that are going to damage the trees. So that's all. I just was wondering if it's worth having, you have a couple of things in here that the tree warden's responsible for doing. Perhaps one of the things they should do is public awareness and outreach for the kinds of things that are causing damage to trees, and maybe that decreases the number of hearings that are even required, that even end up happening.
I agree. Public outreach is always very important.
Yeah, that was it.
It may be item K here that might kind of, kind of the public tree management coordination. Maybe you could classify that as outreach. All right. Any other questions for Mimi?
Andrew, I had one more question.
Sure.
Sorry about that. I forgot to ask. I think if you scroll up to C, was a removal of the dead, no, you did go down. You just passed it, you right there. 4C, sorry, removal of a public shade tree that are dead and dying. Let's say I have this in front of my house. Everybody agrees it has to come down. It's a hazard. Is the town going to pay me to have the tree removed and the stump ground up, or just the tree removed? Do you know?
That I can't answer.
You don't know. Okay. It's happened nearby. I was just wondering the process. That's all I wondered. Thank you.
That's a good point, actually, because I've seen them take down trees, but I have not seen any stump grinding, which is kind of the next step in it, right? Especially if you want to replant there.
I just wonder, you might get asked at a town meeting. I don't know if it'll come up.
And
Thanks
I
so
have
much.
one more question. I think it was answered, but just some clarification. I know there's another article, I believe, to fund the removal of the first, what was it, 155. Refresh my memory, please, of what's in place to fund the tree removal moving forward.
So right now, Howard, we have a arborist line item in the DPW budget, and I think it was, Mimi, correct me if I'm wrong, like 80,000 this year.
Mhm.
85.
85. And that's kind of steady every year. We didn't expend much of it this year because obviously we didn't take down any trees. We did pay for the arborist. This covers the arborist to come out and assess the trees, a professional arborist, plus the removal of the trees and et cetera. But so that's kind of the ongoing maintenance. But since we have years of not doing it, it's just obviously larger than we currently have budget for.
But is that 85? Do we feel that's sufficient to keep up with it? There seems to be a pandemic of trees getting hit by various, there's a variety of pine getting hit now, and one of my arborists was telling me oaks are having a challenge after that. I just want to make sure we're not coming back again to fund this with another fund later. So I just want to make sure we have some plan to have enough money in there to keep this going.
Yeah, I would say the 85 has been enough for the past. I think, if we want to include tree planting, I think that would be probably not be able to cover it under that, which is why Mimi's talking about a separate fund, and so that would be on top of the 85 possibly, or in lieu of, and that would be like we do with the facilities, where we put $100,000 in an article that carries over from year to year. So if we can kind of pool that money if we don't do many this year and more the next. I think it was 150 or so, Mimi, for the fall trees, the 150 trees or so this year.
Yeah, so I think the warrant article that's coming to this fall town meetings for like 152,000
Okay.
or something.
Yeah, so that's, I think the amount of trees that we need to cut down, Howard, are well in excess of what more than we've ever done. So the 85 probably would cover it, but I think, there's going to be analysis done to figure out the right number for Springtown meeting to have that ongoing article.
Yes,
that would
that's what I'm
cover it.
wondering about, that ongoing article. It says that'll be next meeting, not this one. So
Yeah, so we have the arborist funds in this year's budget, right? That's not going to be enough to cover these 150 trees, which is why we'll vote tonight on that $152,000 article to do a catch up.
Mhm.
Then the question is going forward, the idea would be in probably the Springtown meeting to come forward with an article to have that fund created, whatever it is, 100,000, it's called $100,000 a year, where a third of it was for the removal, a third was for maintenance, and a third was for planting, right? So that assessment will have to be done in order to understand what the projected costs are for that, using DPW, but we don't know what that is yet. But I feel pretty comfortable, Mimi, that the 85 or so that we have in the budget plus the 152 article will get us through the year.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
thank you.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, Mimi.
Thank you. It's good practice for me.
Do you is Marnie going to be able to join after you, or do you want to cover off on Scenic Roads? I mean, it's
I'll talk about Scenic Roads too if Marnie's not here.
Sure.
I didn't hear back from her, so I don't know if she was able
That's
to
fine.
attend.
So again, Scenic Roads, I don't think that has changed at all from last time we looked at it. Any road that wasn't designated scenic, the idea is that it becomes designated scenic. Does anyone have any questions on this one, since we did kind of see it already for Springtime meeting?
Yeah, Andrew, what was the main reason why this was such a hot debate at town meeting? It became a pretty contested conversation from what I can remember. What was the main premise there?
The premise there is, this is me, my personal opinion. The scenic road naming designation is probably a bad name for what we're trying to do here, right? What this really is a additional tree protection plus stone walls if there are them, right? So the difference between the regular chapter 87, and Mimi, correct, keep me from honest, and the scenic roads is it includes the stone walls. But in theory, the trees are covered underneath chapter 40. Now they're also covered under 87. And so it adds the stone walls, but what this does is it adds the protection of having the planning board also vote on top of having the select board. A lot of people, or some people, feel that, in other towns like Ashland, I believe, they designate only very few roads scenic, and those are mostly the historical roads with the stone walls and the big trees, and the ones that you would call scenic, or they have they're on a lake and they have a nice vista or something like that. Versus Southborough, that is using the scenic road designation basically to add additional protections by having to go through two boards to all the trees in a public way, besides numbered routes. That's basically some people might say, hey, this, I don't know a good example, but Thayer Lane was just created in 2015. It's not scenic, right? It's a brand new road. I wouldn't call that scenic. And that was basically, what I understand Adam as the big piece.
Can I speak to that just for a second?
Sure.
So since the annual town meeting, and Marnie did discuss this bylaw with Conservation and the Historical Commission, and that question came up: what's the definition of scenic? Why isn't it defined? and it's not defined in Mass General laws. So Marnie went and looked at all the surrounding towns and pulled all their definitions together, and she took those definitions, which are all pretty broad in all the surrounding towns also. And she visited 3/4 of those 68 roads that are to be redesignated. And she found that all of them met met the definition. So we might as well just designate them all. And in addition, there's a line added in there about the simplification of town administrative and logistic scenic road management. Just because if all the roads are scenic roads, it's easier for people to know what the process is. And it's not an additional meeting with the planning board, it's a consolidated hearing with the tree warden, which is the select board. So it's no difference for somebody coming forward to remove trees. The difference is that the planning board is involved.
All right, any other questions on scenic roads? All right, well, thank you, Mimi.
Thank you very much.
All right. So how do you guys want to cover this? Do you want to vote on them one by one? Talk about them first and then vote at the end, or any preference?
I'll support it working through all of them.
Preference.
All right, Howard, what was that?
I wouldn't mind voting on each one as we finish talking about it, just while it's fresh in our mind, but I can do it either way.
That's fine. Let's do that. All right.
I think you went too far.
I did. I move that do we have a motion to for the advisory committee to support Article 1 in the 9/21/22 draft warrant as printed in the draft warrant?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All right. Roll call vote. Eric.
Aye.
Howard.
Aye.
Marcy.
Aye.
Adam.
Aye.
Eric. Oh no, not Eric. Who else? I forget.
Me.
Tim. There you go.
Aye.
Aye. And I'm going to vote nay. So 5-1, Claire.
You?
Okay. Do we have a motion to support Article 2, the scenic roads in the 9/21/22 draft warrant?
Moved.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All right. Eric.
Aye.
Tim.
Aye.
Adam.
Aye.
Marcy.
Aye.
Howard.
Aye.
And I am a nay. So same 5-1. Okay, Article 3 is to see if the town will vote to appropriate transfer funds from available funds, sum of $152,000 for the purpose of addressing public shade trees. So it's basically what we talked about. This is the true up cost to get rid of all those trees for the last few years. Do we have a motion to support Article 3 as written in the 9/21/22 draft warrant?
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, real quick, guys. Do we know, is this strictly for removal or does this also cover like replacement, planting of new trees?
I believe it is just the removal.
I believe that's correct. I don't know if it's stump grinding either, though. It's definitely just taking.
For some reason, I thought it included a few stumps. Certainly not all of them, but I think there was a few that needed some stumps. I think some needed a crane, but yeah, I think there was a mix of them.
Has there
That was a
been,
lot of.
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Eric.
I was just asking if there has been discussion in other forums regarding to the replacement of those trees, right? Or new trees being planted there. They have a plan to plant elsewhere for one-for-one replacement. Is that, do we feel comfortable that we can do that within existing DPW budget? I guess that's where my head goes.
So right now, it's not a requirement, right? The replanting of a tree or planting of new trees is something that, you know, we haven't historically done as part of the tree removals, right? That would be more part of the new bylaw. But no, they don't have funds to do that right now.
Got it. Got
So
it.
that's
Okay.
interesting. If you vote the other one in first and then vote this, does it fall under the new one or the old?
It would still be the old one, I would assume, because the other one wouldn't have been approved by the AG for, I don't know, probably 6 months.
Yeah, that's a good clarification. I appreciate that, Andrew. So I wish I'd been more read into this previously, but that's my own fault.
Yeah, I think as part of the tree hearings and all the work they did with the select board, I think each tree kind of had like a plan on what they were going to do with it. Not to replant it, but you know, I think they went like, this one's going to be using a crane and this one uses a stump grinder.
And that's one of the reasons the cost is so much is there was plenty of crane work.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
So-
Well, just from my take, I'm supportive of addressing the trees, but it feels like we're rushing into this while we're also trying to get a more formalized policy around trees per the two previous articles. So yeah, I'm not supportive, just throwing it out there. I think that
I'm not sure I agree with the rushing into it part. Some of those trees have been on this list for 2-3 years, and frankly, some of them haven't just fallen on their own across the roadway, and you know, thankfully haven't hit anything.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I think, yeah, to Howard's point, these should have come down a long time ago. It's technically that we are, by having people submit a dead tree and it not being cut down in a timely manner, the town does have liability. So whether the other bylaws pass, I want these trees down yesterday.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's fair. I think you're right. Rushing into is the wrong phrase. I just feel like if we're looking at this systematically and we're putting this other policy in place to go and do this massive effort before that policy is in place, I'm not super cool with that, but that's all right. I can be in the minority.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but there's also this is a pretty ambiguously written article, right? Like, how many trees are we talking about? Which trees? Are they all dead trees? It doesn't say that.
There was actually there's a written plan that's associated with this from all the tree hearings. There is a very substantial list that is very detailed of what is involved, which is how they got the cost.
Yeah, they have by tree plan, and this has been already put out to bid, and this is what the price came back for.
Okay, I mean, that's
It's
great.
funds, right? It's just we know what we want to do. We don't have enough funds in the DPW budget or anywhere else to cover it. I mean, we could use reserve fund, but they thought it was worth going to town meeting since we're having one to just get the funds, so we're not basically depleting other areas.
So is it unnecessary to put into this article, you know, as per that report?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, regardless, the select board is going to have to approve it, and they know what trees are going to need to come down as they're the tree warden.
Okay, because as written here, without linking it directly to that, this 152,000 can go towards any addressing of public public shade trees that need to be removed.
Yeah, I mean, the summary kind of talks about the backlog of trees that have gone through the joint hearings.
Andrew, I wonder if they'll put up this slide. I mean, they have that, as Howard's mentioning, and you mentioned this, the very nice spreadsheet of all these trees. They talked about them one by one. I don't know if they'll bring that forward at town meeting. They probably will.
Probably. I mean, I don't know if this is going to be one that's really going to, I mean, people have been clamoring to get these trees down for a long period of time. I hope this isn't too contentious, but I see what you're saying. And it could have been worded more specifically to cover the ones covered in this meeting with this list on these streets, right? Specifically, but I think I'm okay with the language because I think they understand what it's for. All right, any other questions? All right, roll call vote. Howard.
Aye.
Marcy.
Did we make a motion on this one?
We did. We were in
Yep.
the discussion period of the motion.
Thank you.
Aye.
Adam.
I definitely agree with this in principle. I do think it should be tightened up as written. So just on that basis, I'm going to say nay, but it's not because I disagree with the principle and the need to do it.
Tim.
I'll vote aye.
Eric.
Nay.
And I'll vote aye. So 4-2.
That doesn't mean you can't propose an amendment at town meeting if you want to tighten it up.
Yeah, I definitely think these trees should come down. It sounds like they have been specifically identified and are a hazard and a liability. So I'm 100% supportive of that. I think it's $152,000 that is written in a pretty ambiguous way as far as where that money is being spent. So that's all.
Yeah.
I think when it's clear.
I agree.
now,
There's a
yeah.
couple parts in the warrant where the language is a little ambiguous. But
that will probably be clear at town meeting. So it won't be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm supportive of the trees come down. Clearly the work's been done. I don't like the idea of doing it while like having this much larger article and plan and roadmap that we're also trying to approve, but doing this, not following that guide. And if there was a reciprocal plan of how we were going to replace these or where that money was, what that was going to cost, and we knew what that picture looked like, again, then I'd feel a lot better about it. But this is my take.
all right. Do we have a motion for advisory to support Article 4 as written in the 9/21/22 draft warrant?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah.
So this is, let me just explain it. So this is the additional, when we did the fire budget, if you remember correctly, we left the year-over-year increase for the salaries of the union members flat because we were in a collective bargaining agreement. What this is the additional cost that we didn't put into their budget for the increase that they just agreed to. Which I think when Kathy was here, we had it in the back of our mind that all of the collective bargainings that were, this is about in par with what we thought it would be, but.
Did we budget this anywhere or just?
No, they don't specifically budget it usually, Howard, just because the Mark Purple and the select board think it kind of loses, if we already budget for 3%, then they're going to ask for 3%. If we budget for 4%, they're going to ask for 4%. So as a negotiating tactic, they don't put it in the budget until after it's signed.
And I appreciate that. And, just there's some place we can, put it, on the back end somewhere of, another fund, or
Yeah.
so we're not asking for it, and, not trying to be snarky, but a little snarky. What happens if we say no, and don't fund it? Town meeting.
It would be an interdepartmental or a reserve fund at the end of the year. Right, and we're going to have to pay it because they signed the contract. So
that's my point of it not being budgeted anywhere, is they agreed to something that wasn't. That's the part I'm not laughing, but
I don't disagree. It's just this is the
I get it.
What they do.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? All right, Howard. I think I didn't hear you there.
Sorry. Aye.
Okay, perfect. Marcy,
Aye.
Adam,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Andrew is aye. 6-0. Okay. Article 5. I guess I'll just any discussion we'll just do in the actual discussion portion of the motion. Do we have a motion for advisory to support Article 5 as written in the 9/21/22 draft warrant?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, for discussion. So this is some kind of property deductible that wasn't covered by insurance. I don't really know too much besides what's written here.
Makes it harder to support if we don't know what was damaged. Again, it's not a lot of money. It's it seems obvious, but it's did a tree fall on something, or did someone drive in?
Sam, you're on. Do you know more about this? If you wouldn't mind, could you raise your hand if we could bring you over?
Yeah, Andrew, this is again deductible for property insurance, and again, it's hard to predict, but apparently folks who are monitoring this have come up with a need to increase this a little bit by $10,000 here. So it basically again covers our contribution for losses from the insurance.
Gotcha. So I think it's one of those. I think this was, if I remember correctly, this was an increase that we got after the budget was set from our insurance company.
Could be. It could also be a factor of expected losses, if you will, based on recent experience. So if you got a loss, the insurance pays for it, but if there's a deductible, we pay just like auto insurance. So you really can't predict very well, and we're trying to cover the possibility here, I think.
Okay.
Thank you, Sam.
All right. Any other questions on this one? All right. Marcy?
Aye.
Adam?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
I want to say Sam. Who did I miss? Eric?
Howard.
Nope. You got me.
Howard.
Oh, Howard.
Aye.
All right. Okay. And Andrew is aye. 6-0.
We're just shaking off the cobwebs after a little summer break.
Well, when I'm presenting, I can't see everybody's faces, so you have to go by memory, and my memory is not that strong.
We got to get you a second screen, then you can see it all and get confused by which screen you're watching.
Exactly.
You can actually switch your view too, and go from speaker to gallery, I believe, and you can swap back and forth. So
That's a good idea. Yeah. Okay. Now I got the panelists, and makes it easier for me. Okay. We're on Article 6, making good progress. Do we have a motion for the advisory committee to support Article 6 as printed in the 9/21/22 draft warrant?
So moved.
Second.
So this is one, that I did particularly love the language in it. I'm supportive of doing it. Basically, this is to put a charging station at the public safety building for the police cruisers and other pieces. What I don't love is the language. So if I read this and you know, so somebody correct me if they disagree with it. Town meeting would be giving the select board the ability to grant easements to National Grid, basically in perpetuity, because there's no termination date to this right, on any town-owned property in order to facilitate, which I thought was a pretty loose, facilitate the installation, not necessarily the installation of charging stations for hybrid or electric vehicles. And, that could be, okay, that could be putting in a solar farm and, adding a, electric charging station next to it, right? So I think I would like to see the and such other town-owned locations removed and have it just be public safety. And if they want to add one at the library or they want to do it in other places, come back with a plan to do that. But or have them tighten up the language to that effect. But I'm curious what everybody else thinks.
Yeah, Andrew. Oh, sorry.
No, go for it, Adam.
Do you know how other towns handle property that's going to be used for EV charging stations or solar energy? Does it go through a similar type of, I guess, towns like us? Do they use the select board to grant these easements, or does the town vote on it on a case-by-case basis?
I don't know. I mean, I would think larger things, certainly like if somebody wanted to put in a solar farm in the town, property, that would probably be something I would think would come to the town meeting to vote. Something like this where it's, in theory, not a huge impact to the town to, add a charging station at the library or at the school or someplace to, in a parking lot, right?
Yeah, but why do they need an ease? I guess maybe, I mean, I'm not an expert here.
Well, so they need to, National Grid needs to put in the equipment and do the things to make it a charging station.
But then they own the property?
Well, they don't own the property, right? They have a right to use it, right? An easement is a right to use. So like we have an easement for the electric company to go across the roads to put the lines, right? They would need to have a similar thing to get the electricity to the charging station. I'm not super familiar on how the easements work for these, but.
And I'm assuming, they're trenching wire to get to it, but they're pulling it off of their pole and their meter. It says no cost to the town, but are they charging for that power? I mean, there's just no information on this whatsoever. So,
yeah.
Is this going to cost us to replace the equipment, in 5 years? Is it, is it tapping onto the police station's power grid, and then that adds to our electric bill of the town as well? It's not that I'm all for it. Just there's, it'd be nice if there was something to come on in the article that we knew what it was doing. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think for this one, my inclination would be to maybe make this one of our either not support or at town meeting, and work with the select board between now and town meeting to maybe, amend the article to be a little bit more specific and provide some more information. And I did set up a meeting for, a room at Trotter to have a meeting right before town meeting, like we do sometime for some of our last minute votes at town meeting. So I don't know what people think about that idea.
How do we vote to say out at town meeting?
We basically change it to at town meeting and just vote to say that.
That's fine.
Everybody okay with that idea?
I would be in favor of that so we can get more information.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm assuming they'll present something at town meeting and what it's for. So.
Yeah. I want to see a plan for this one.
Okay.
Yeah, last quick question. I'm supportive of what we just said. Is this strictly for the use of town vehicles, or is it open to the public?
I think technically it would be open to the public. I'm not sure if we could use it in this specific one in the public safety building. I'm not sure if where it is will be in a public lot, or I think it's gonna be more probably under the awning where the police park.
See, I read it as for police cars because they're
Yeah.
saying they're supplementing the fleet with more hybrid and electric vehicles in the fleet.
Yeah.
So
Right,
I'm
again,
reading
it
this
depends
as
on where they
children.
install it. If they install it in the public parking lot and the police use it, right, then in theory, if the police isn't there, I guess somebody could use it. I think it's going to be under the awning in the police parking lot, so it'd be for police use only, or somebody that, is allowed to park in that lot. But they're talking about adding more to other places in town, like the library, which would certainly be public.
Got it. Yeah, so I would echo some of the similar concerns and wanting clarification. So I'm good punting this to town meeting.
Okay. So Tim, do we need to amend the motion to change it from support to at town meeting, I guess?
Well, I think so. Unless everybody just agrees that we withdraw it.
Okay.
Does anybody object?
All right, we're just gonna do at town meeting. I'm not even gonna,
No objection.
we'll withdraw the motion and I'll just label it as at town meeting. Article 7. Okay, is there a motion for advisory committee to support Article 7 as written in the 9/21/22 warrant?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? And I believe the background on this is without this language up until town meeting date, I believe somebody can bring a citizen petition or something like that, with, as opposed to having it.
Yeah, I don't remember if that or 10 days, but there may be language already. This is, a shorter period. I personally like this one that, in the past, there's been a couple of petitions, jumped in at the last minute that no one knew anything about and were usually not well prepared and just, they didn't serve the purpose of town meeting personally. So I'm for it.
Sam, what can you add?
Thanks, Andrew. This is one that I had actually been pushing. Historically, with our previous town council, we had believed that once the select board closed the warrant for a town meeting, no additional articles would be allowed for that town meeting. And our new town council has pointed out that that's not correct, that we can do that with articles that are sponsored by town entities, but a citizen petition can come in literally, a minute before a town meeting starts if it's properly certified, et cetera. And so the concern has been that there needs to be reasonable time for the public to understand and people to vet and communicate, discuss articles. And so this 30-day period seems to us to be a reasonable advance notice to make that happen. And even that's pretty tight still, but at least that avoids last minute surprises where something significant gets dropped into the town meeting. People don't know it's there and don't have an opportunity to educate themselves and come vote on it. So we're trying to do something practical here, but not limit citizen petitions unreasonably. So we thought this gives people plenty of time to do citizen petitions and then an accelerated schedule for review and debate and discussion of it. So that's where we wound up on it.
All right. Any more questions on this one? All right, roll call vote. Howard.
Aye.
Marcy.
Aye.
Eric.
Aye.
Adam.
Aye.
Tim.
Aye.
All right, 6-0. Aye, Andrew. All right. Article 8. To see if the town will vote to amend chapter 41 of the town code, town meetings by adding the following section. Okay, so do we have a motion for advisory to support Article 8 as printed in the 9/21/22 warrant?
So moved.
Second.
All right. So this one is, I think, the article that Jim Haggerty wanted to add to make sure that people were comfortable with using a clicker. Hence why the clicker is in the next article. I believe him and Paul wanted the town meeting to vote that they would be in favor of allowing clicker technology in town meeting before we move forward with the request to rent them for a future town meeting to test them.
So question, is it legal in Massachusetts? I know we have some archaic laws that, you know, that our town meeting had said, you know, that is the privilege of town meeting, but you know, I know a lot of those laws were written that it must be, you know, how you can vote. So I don't even know. I'm asking, I have no idea how clicker is legal. So.
Yeah, it is legal. There are quite a few towns in Massachusetts that use them. So we talked about this kind of extensively last year, Howard, before you joined, but the clickers are legal. A lot of other towns use them. That doesn't allow you to vote from home or online, right? You still have to be in person. You still have to go to the desk. They give it to you. It's basically, instead of the card, you can vote on the clicker. And so you can count them faster, especially for the ones where instead of having to go around and count by hand.
And do they assign a, how
They
is
assign
it?
a clicker to each person.
So do you get a number clicker and it records your vote as you?
Correct. Correct. I mean, yeah, so you get a number clicker, and then I think if you go to the bathroom, you have to turn your clicker in and then we give it back. One interesting thing that we haven't bought them yet, but the idea was Jim was going to try to buy them, and assuming that this rental worked okay, and we'll get to it on the next article, assuming this rental was okay, the idea is $5,000 for the rental, we can use that $5,000 towards the purchase.
Right.
So it's kind of a trial. And Jim, you can get numbers 1 through 10,000 on the clickers. There's a bunch of other towns that have, say 1 through 500 or 1 through 1,000, depending on how big their town meetings usually are. What Jim wanted to do was get like 9,000 to 9,500, because then they could borrow clickers from other towns if we ever had like a big town meeting, and they could borrow ours, and have the other numbers. So Jim's done a lot of work on that part, but that's some more background. Okay. Any other questions? All right, Howard.
Hi.
Marcy.
Aye.
Adam.
Aye.
Eric.
Aye.
Tim.
Aye.
And Andrew's aye. Okay, then we get to the next one, Article 9. Which is basically the payment for those town clickers, and then a pavement management system, which Sam, I might have you speak to when we get to the discussion part. Or Sam, if you want to just kind of bring that one up right now, that'd be good.
Okay, happy to give you a quick overview. This is basically an approach that evaluates the condition of roadways and then uses mathematical optimization models to figure out how we get the biggest bang for the buck to maintain the roadways. There's something like 9 different treatment levels, from light seal coating, relatively inexpensive, but it doesn't last very long, to dig it all up and rebuild the road, which is very expensive, but it lasts for 20 years if you take care of it. And the traditional approach to pavement management is the worst first model, as they describe it. So you wait till it's totally degraded, and then you build a new road. And it turns out that you wouldn't be surprised to know that that the best approach is a lot more expenditure on preventative maintenance, and you keep it from degrading and cracking and so forth. Lexington, for example, has done this for the last 10 years or so, and they say several $100,000 a year. And they've upgraded their overall road condition index. They calculate an index from 0 to 100. And they started at something like 60, and they're now up into the mid 80s over the time period to be able to get, again, a lot more bang for your buck. And the model can tell you, if you have $1 million to spend on paving, here's where you spend it. And you can lay out different scenarios and add number of constraints to it. So mathematically, it's complicated to solve, but it's doable with current technologies. And a lot of towns use it. Sudbury is using one of these, for example, down Northborough uses one of these. And so this 29K actually gets the initial evaluation and planning. And at some point down the road, the folks who use these do an update. And that's 5 or 10 grand after 2 or 3 years, something like that, to come in and take another look. So that's the expectation. But again, it just gives us, I think, a lot smarter way to do this. And it takes some of the subjective judgment out. And the folks who use it say that the smart way to do it is you don't allocate your full budget this way. You leave a small contingency to deal with either emergencies or particularly noisy residents who demand that their road be paved, and give you some flexibility there. So I see it as a way to get sort of into the modern age of doing this from the traditional approach to this problem. So I think it's a great thing, and the select board voted to support this.
And I had watched one of Northborough's advisory meetings where they covered off on this, and it was very interesting to see, like, they could go in, we always do okay, it's $400,000 a year to the road maintenance, right? They have charts and data, and they can say, okay, we're currently an 85 score. If we do 400,000, we're going to go down to an 83. If we do 600,000, we're going to go up to here. And if we do 800, we can go up to here. So they have a lot of data on that. It also helps with which roads do you do and what order and sequence, and a lot of good information. So I think it's certainly an interesting concept.
I'm sorry if I missed it. Is this a service that somebody's going to come in and perform for us every year, or is this actual system we're buying that somebody has to be trained on?
Tim, there are several parts to it. One is that there is an initial assessment. And Andrew, to your Northborough point, there are a couple of ways to do the initial assessment. Northborough actually did one where they got people in a car and drove around and did a subjective assessment, pavement condition. The ones we're looking at actually strap a GoPro camera on the hood of the car and drive around town. And then there are folks who have AI software to actually turn that video into a condition assessment, which I think is a lot smarter way to do it. It gives you a consistent way longitudinally if you want to do the same thing next year or following year. So you get that assessment, you get the initial model operation, Tim, and then you get access to use that model in subsequent years until you decide, I'm a little out of date, I want to go back and do an initial assessment again. And you may or may not choose to do a reassessment on the entire network. You may just look at part of the roadway for a subsequent assessment of it, or you may decide to go for 5 or 10 years with what you've got if you're comfortable with it. So a number of options there, but you get used to the software for a while in addition to that initial assessment process.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. Any further questions?
Are we doing this as part of the discussion? We haven't voted this, open this one yet, made a motion.
This one, we are in the discussion portion, right? We didn't motion and second this, right?
Correct, we did not motion this. So my only discussion on this article is I'd like to see them split into two. We have an A to B. A is for the clickers, B is for this pavement management system. I think it should be written as article, and maybe we do that at time meeting as 9A, 9B. But these really should be two separate articles, in my opinion. So,
yep, it's not a bad idea, but it's kind of like capital. We kind of do it as a chunk, but we could, certainly you can X off certain portions of it without killing the article.
Okay, yeah, go. So if for example, if the article above fails, then A is moot. Right. So. I don't know.
I mean, normally if people were that objective to it, to a portion of it, that they were going to vote against it, they might ask to amend it to remove a piece.
Right.
Or you can even split it in town meeting, I believe.
So, okay.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion for advisory committee to support Article 9 as written in the 9/21/22 warrant?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Sorry, guys, one last clarification. Forgive me if I missed this. Is this a reoccurring cost or a one-time?
One time.
Okay.
I mean, the pavement management system, we might decide in 3 to 4 years, we want to, have them rerun some roads and spend some money to update the data.
Right.
But
It's one.
it's a one time.
Cool. Sorry about that. Thanks.
Howard,
Aye.
I'm gonna go out of order. Tim,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Adam,
Aye.
Marcy,
Aye.
and Andrew is aye. 6-0. Okay. I might motion Articles 10 and 11 together. Basically, it's, and anybody correct me if they don't want to do that, but basically it's the assessor is using some of the overlay surplus to upgrade the real estate software and to bring in the contractor to do the cyclical assessment services, appraisals. Anybody disagree with doing this together?
Yeah, I'd like to keep them separate, actually.
Sure. Okay. Do we have a motion for advisory committee to support Article 10 as written in the 9/21/22 warrant?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, actually.
Sure.
Quick question. If Sam's still around. I thought we were moving all system-related expenses to the IT budget.
Tim, I think that's correct. We're working on that, but this one had some, I think, strange wrinkles to it. I just heard the technology committee talking about this one recently, and they were on board with it, but a little concerned about, again, the quirks in the assessor's system, because they use a system that is partially cloud-based and partially not. So it's a sort of a strange combination of things. And in fact, I think there's some pressure to get this done to stay current with the assessment process. So we've sort of not planned our way into a corner on this a little bit, I think, unfortunately.
All right. That's it. Thank you, Sam.
Sure.
Okay. But again, this won't technically hit the assessment or the levy. It's going to go out of the reversal of an overlay. Okay. Tim,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Adam,
Aye.
Marcy,
Aye.
Howard.
Aye.
Andrew is aye. Okay. Do we have a motion for the advisory committee to support Article 11 as written in the 9/21/22 warrant?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Again, this is overlay surplus for professional appraisers to come in and for the cyclical inspection for residential properties.
So is this where they're sending people out with those name tags and they come in and ask to come in your house and do all that? And
Correct.
I do have a question. I think we saw the Board of Assessor come before us for their budget. How many people are in that office? Do we know? Like, why are we contracting this out?
I think it's just 2. Sam, do you know off the top of your head?
I think
Or
it's
3.
two full and a part-time maybe. And to Marcy's question, the state requires each town to completely reassess all properties every 5 years or something like that. So it's a huge effort, far beyond most towns, permanent staff capabilities. And so they hire a contractor to come in, go around and do all these assessments.
and who sets the criteria for those assessments?
It is the standard thing that our local assessors do when they value a property. They basically, when they measure the property and make sure they've got the right square footage, room counts, and so on and so forth, and catch things that have been constructed since the last assessment to make sure the raw data is consistent. And then it goes into their standard assessment model that they use computer model. I don't know what all the parameters are, but that kicks out a value that they then look at. And if it's not reasonable, they go back and do it again. And to the earlier question, they do go around and knock on doors, but you actually don't have to let them in. And if you don't, they use the values from the prior assessment, unless they really think there's something very strange going on, and then they've got other ways to get better data. But you do have a choice about that.
All right. Any further questions? Okay, roll call vote. Tim?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Adam?
Aye.
Marcy?
Nay.
Howard?
Nay.
I'm gonna go aye.
If we didn't fund this, what's the alternative? Hire somebody else?
If we didn't fund this, they probably would try to find the money someplace else. I think they have to do it regardless.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. I mean, I don't think we can stop them from doing the state mandated appraisals. It's just, you know, and I think this is something we need to talk to Paul about when he comes before us for his budget is, you know, why were these things not caught ahead of time?
And if it's state mandated, why isn't there a state subsidy to do it? Why are we paying for it? So,
Well, I mean, it's state mandated rules, right? I mean, there's a lot of stuff like we got to pay for schools, right? I mean, we have to educate kids in our town, right? That doesn't mean the state pays for everything. Right. There's a lot of state mandates that we have to pay for. Okay. Do we have a motion for advisory committee to support Article 12 as written in the 9/21/22 warrant?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. So this is let me bring Debbie over. Sorry. Before I forget.
She can talk.
I was going to bring her over and Kevin too.
Hi, everybody.
Debbie, is Kevin Grant or is that Kevin?
Kevin might be dialed in on his own another
Okay.
computer. I don't know if he'll be joining actually.
Okay, I'll leave him. Let me just tell me if you need me to bring him over.
Okay.
Okay. Yep. So Debbie, why don't you just kind of walk through your kind of thought process here and what you're trying to accomplish and all that jazz.
Okay, so thank you and good to join you. Just first to say that, as you may know, I'm a member of the planning board, but this is a citizens petition. So this is not anything to do with planning board. So if I can just read, this is Article 12. This is to see if the town will vote to request that the select board restrict the placement of flags in the old burial ground to just the official flag of the United States of America, flown on the existing pole that's already there, in accordance with state and federal preservation guidelines and out of respect for those buried within. All additional flags on raised flag poles shall be removed, and this policy would not apply to any individual grave markers. So this is a non-binding petition warrant. The summary is really that this is really based on a recent Supreme Court decision, although this is sort of a long-standing issue in town. Let's just first acknowledge that this issue isn't new. If anybody wants to find more information about a hearing that the the select board had, it was May 4th, 2021. There was, information given about the flags that are put up by, appears to be the veterans group, and opposition to those flags. And this is historic and somewhat a bit contentious, discussion around those flags and whether any flags should be actually in the old burial ground. So my take on this is really quite different, and it's based on a recent Supreme Court decision from our own Boston City Hall. And I sent you guys some background on that. I'm sure nobody really had time to read it, but maybe you saw the article in the Boston Globe. Essentially, this has to do with freedom of speech and First Amendment rights. And what happened at Boston City Hall is there was a long-standing tradition of flying flags of groups that were having celebrations out on the plaza or something, which is request, and their flag could be flown along one of the three major flag poles there at Boston City Hall. And longstanding for years. There was a rejection by one group. So for example, I think the example in the Boston Globe was that, there was a pride parade and the LGBT flag was flown, but there was another group that was having a rally or celebration. And I believe they were requesting the Christian flag to be flown, and they were denied. So it was appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court voted unanimously that's an infringement, a violation of free speech. And it's in my opinion, quite an interesting example, because while trying to protect free speech for some, it turns out that Boston City Hall was violating free speech for others. And essentially, it occurred to me, this decision was back in May, but I think it was only reported out in August, that might be a time for us to reconsider what's happening down at the old burial ground with some of the flags. In my opinion, many people are offended by the flags that are there, and some people are not. I spoke to some veterans. One person, for example, was a Navy SEAL who said, I fought for free speech. And I said, yeah, but, do you know about the Supreme Court decision, which has ramifications for municipalities that don't have any kind of a policy? And he said, maybe the flag shouldn't be there. He said, I don't want to see a rainbow flag. So he was really honest. He said, I don't really mind those flags, but he said, I don't want to see other flags. And so I think what I've come to the conclusion that, maybe that burial ground just shouldn't be used for flags. And I think that's what the Supreme Court decision is really about, is there's places for free speech. But if that free speech is allowed on public property, then is the town speaking for one group and not the other? And that's, I believe, why there was a unanimous decision at the Supreme Court. And I just want to let you know, I did some driving around and looking online and looked at some other burial grounds nearby. And it appears to me, like Hopkinton and Ashland and Marlborough and, very close, and I don't see any burial grounds that have like flags like we do. We do have an All Wars Memorial. What I was finding in the burial grounds that some of them had no flag, just not a flag to be found. Maybe I missed it. But if there was a flag, it was the United States of America flag. And so it just occurred to me, like, we can all rally around that one flag because we're all Americans. We may not agree on some of these flags that are there right now, but whatever flag goes there, there's going to be a group that doesn't agree. So my proposal is really to take the flags, they're unofficial. Let's really be honest. They're not the ones flown on the flagpole. They're put up by private groups. And the point about the Supreme Court decision is if you allow one group, you have to allow all groups if you don't have a policy. So I'm suggesting we have a policy, and I'm suggesting that we, have our American flag. We have the All Wars Memorial nearby. We've got the POW, Massachusetts. We've got every flag you can imagine that's very, very close by. And just to respect the burial ground that is in our historic, district. And also, let's just keep the free speech and all this out of the public square. We now know that, I think, as a town, we're exposed. The town has no particular policy to allow or deny any group. So I'm suggesting we just stick to the American flag and remove the flags that are there in our old burial ground. So that's my little summary. Be happy to answer any questions.
All right, well, why don't we go around? I'll start with Eric.
Sorry, guys. Being very rude tonight. I got my camera on. No questions this time. I think it makes sense. Appreciate you bringing it to us and providing the additional context.
All right, Tim.
I feel the same. Thank you.
Adam.
Yeah, hi, Debbie. Can you provide some more information on what the flags are that you would like to see removed with this and where they are located?
Yeah, sure. So in the old burial ground, which is next to Pilgrim Church, there are 5 or 6 flags. The veterans group have, given some information on, what they are and, the meaning to them. I must face it, flags have meaning, right? It's a form of speech. So it has a meaning to the particular group, which may not have anything to do with, may or may not, let's say, to the burial ground. But there is a, for example, probably the most known flag is the Don't Tread on Me, the Gadsden flag. And there's another that's a South Carolina Liberty flag. There's a Maine flag that's called Appeal to Heaven. It's the one with the pine tree. There's I think it's called a Bunker Hill flag. That's the blue one with the cross that looks like the Christian flag. Yep. And yeah, that's actually a pretty good picture. It's these smaller ones. These are unofficial flags. And then, as I learned last night at the select board meeting, veterans have been putting them up for a long time, but they don't have actually permission to do that. At least Kathy Cook had requested that information, who allowed you to put those up. I mean, actually, that's very similar to the Boston City Hall tradition of flying flags, but the point is, without a policy, how can you allow some and not others? But yeah, this is a pretty good picture. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I believe there's 7. I think there's a Gadsden flag. That's that Don't Tread on Me that may not be showing. But
I think it's the yellow one on the left.
Is that it?
Yeah, it's just kind of hard to see.
Okay.
So this is Adam. This is the library. So this is right in front of Pilgrim Church. Right next to the townhouse.
Yep.
Just for reference. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and if somebody really wants to know about the flags, there's the great discussion happened last year. There was a lot of research that was put at the May 4th, 2021 meeting, where the veterans provided information. And frankly, there's groups that are people that are offended and asked that they be removed, feeling like it doesn't belong there, and our town square essentially is a burial ground after all. And this is unfortunately at that time there was no decision taken by the select board.
How did the flags come to be there? Do you know?
Well, yeah. So according to Mr. Steve Wynot, who I believe is considered the commander of the VFW, if that's his correct title, he has mentioned that there's like a 30-year history of putting up these flags. He gave sort of a chronology last night, and he also did last year at that May meeting that before him it was somebody before him, and he mentioned actually that the flags I believe that they may change. He decides which ones go up. More or less, I believe that they've been the same, but it's a 30-year history of these flags. And I would just say, if you drive, I think I mentioned you drive around, you know, I'm just not seeing anything like this in any other town.
And so if those flags were on a particular plot, a grave plot, it does mention in here, what's the exact word? I'm trying to see here.
On the grave markers?
Grave marker. So
Yeah, so those are the little individual flags. So I just wanted it to be clear that, you know, if you have a, if you're the caretaker of some of these graves, and I believe that the veterans and other groups, you know, put flags and other, you know, maybe flowers and things on graves. This wouldn't apply to anything small like that. These are maybe they're 5 or 10 feet, kind of stuck in the ground. The ones that's, you know, or larger is what I'm referring to.
Right. So if those particular flags were smaller and on a particular grave plot, that would be okay.
Well, I mean, I see individual flags on graves like, you know, Italian American, Irish American, things like that. Some towns have a policy on that too. They have policies on when you can put those flags up and when you have to take them down. They're usually up around Memorial Day sometime, and then they come down, and maybe Veterans Day. So, you know, in Southborough, that's correct. We have no policy on that either. But I would suspect if somebody wants to put something on personal grave that they are allowed to. I believe we have no policy.
Is that all you got? Anything else, Adam?
For now,
Okay.
I don't want to monopolize the whole conversation.
All right, Marcy.
Hi, Debbie. Thank you for bringing this forward. I got all my questions answered last night up until about 12:06 a.m. So I think I'm all set on this topic. And it's very helpful what you've brought forward, and I support it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Howard.
Hi, Debbie.
Hi, Howard.
It's an interesting challenge. You know, I actually followed the Boston case. It was in several papers and actually in the local news. So that part's interesting. I guess my concern or my question, and it's unrelated. It's the history of the flags that are there. As you said, they're there 30 years. And I guess my question, that the veterans chose that site for a reason. That are the veterans? I didn't realize there were that many veterans built in that cemetery. I thought they were in the other cemetery. But are there veterans in that cemetery as well, or are they doing it for the visibility of?
Well, I think Mr. Wynot I can't speak for him, but I believe I heard him say, you know, there was 30 or 50 veterans. I think that there's over 600 persons buried in the old burial ground. But of course, there's veterans in other burial grounds also. But there's not a military burial ground. And we have All Wars Memorial very close by there, right in front of the townhouse. You know, there are guidelines for municipalities for burial grounds, especially, you know, in historic areas. And, you know, some towns, you know, there's like, for example, maybe a POW flag in addition to, you know, the flag of the United States. If there's no POW flag nearby, we have one nearby. So that's one of the reasons I suggest I don't believe we need any flags. The War Memorial is right there. But you know, I urge you to like drive around in other towns, and you know, I think you know, my take on it is, you know, I was mentioning the you know, veteran Navy SEAL who you know, doesn't. I don't think I mentioned this part of this, but it isn't really a fan or not of the flags. He's not bothered. He said he wasn't bothered by the flags, but he would be bothered, he said, if there was a rainbow flag. I said, well, this is the exact point, is a town cannot allow one group such as the veterans, but deny another group who wants to put up a different flag.
And I agree, and
he
that
was
needs a
willing to
policy.
sign. Mhm.
Right, but that's what you want you're saying we don't have a policy, so you're saying the policy is, since we have no policy, make the policy allow nothing, and that may be the perfect answer. And maybe those flags should be relocated to the other memorial. I guess the harder way would be to create a policy. I guess my concern is just the history of those flags have been there so long, they're almost a part of the town. But I see where you're coming from, and I think it's valid. I just don't know if there's a harder solution to come up with another policy. But you're right. Maybe those flags are offensive to other people, and maybe it is the best thing just to but can you move them someplace else and not continue to offend other people? Or do you say just get rid of them completely? Right.
Yeah, I mean, that other parcel is also public property, so, yeah.
So that's.
But this is only to the, on the old burial ground. This is the suggestion for just this one.
I understand. I'm just, I'm a fan of free speech, but you're right. It involves everyone. So whatever, there's nothing, right? You're going to offend everyone. The American flag may offend someone. Well, it's obviously too bad we're in America, but someone's going to be offended by everything. So do you just write a policy that says you'll accept everyone's flag, or do you do what you're proposing and say we're accept no one's flag?
Yeah.
And then the question is for me, if the veterans do want to put those flags somewhere else, because there is such a history of them in town, where do they go? So.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer for you, Howard, but if you listen to the meeting from last year, there were many people that called in that, are offended because they feel that, I'm just going to summarize, but it was like a 1 or 2 hour long meeting. So it's definitely worth listening to. But, some people feel that the flags have really no relation to Southborough. There might be Revolutionary War and that sort of thing, but there's, Quakers and others buried in the burial ground. They're not exactly represented either. And others feel that, some of these are like South Carolina flag, Maine flag, what does that have to do with Southborough? So they, it's very difficult to go back and look at each individual flag and say, well, what do you think about this one? What do you think about that one?
I'm not proposing that. I'm just.
Yeah, my opinion is just easier just to say, please don't do that in our town square, and let's have a policy that we can all agree on the American flag. I hope.
All right, Howard, you all set?
I'm all set. Thank you.
Yeah, so I caught the selectmen's meeting last night, and I certainly agree that we need a policy. I might be inclined to include a couple more flags as I was thinking maybe the town flag of Southborough or the flag of Massachusetts, ones that are pretty standard that other people might fly in terms of the policy. But again, this is a non-binding article. So I think the policy eventually would get set by select board, but I think I would be more open to adding a couple more flags as part of the policy of flags that we could fly in Southborough.
Yeah, and those flags I think are right there at the townhouse too. Oh, we were talking earlier, Andrew. I don't know if the town of Southborough flag is flying over at the townhouse, but I think the Massachusetts flag is right there, and it's just really steps away.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and I'm just saying, like, if we had a policy in town, right? Whether it's this flagpole, I think we should have a on-town property flag policy, not just the old burial ground. I think it would, to your point, like somebody asked us to put one on the front of the townhouse for whatever reason, which is what happened basically with Boston. It couldn't hurt to have an actual policy that says, we fly these flags and these flags only.
Yeah.
But again, that's more for the select board to take into consideration. But You know, your article certainly points them in that direction. Okay. Any further questions?
Why, I guess, because there's flags in this burial ground, this is written specifically for the burial ground. But why is this policy, I suppose, specifically targeting the burial ground? If this is the direction that you believe we should go with public space, why is this targeted at the burial ground?
Yeah, I mean, I think just what you said is that there are flags there now that many people find offensive. And it's a very public one because it's right there in our town center. I mean, this is non-binding, and so I would hope that, you know, if a policy is written, that it would include eventually other burial grounds. I mean, there are people who spoke up at the meeting to say, you know, they ride on a school bus every day and they feel offended. You know, I feel there's an urgency to this because there's been so much unrest about this for so long. You know, despite what has been said, this is not one or two people. This is really, there's a large group of people who feel offended. So, you know, just to be clear, you know, I believe that this is a violation of free speech, and it's happening right in the old burial ground. And now the Supreme Court decision, you know, pretty much backs that up. So for me, this is the most urgent, but I think that if the select board were to write a policy, I would hope that it would apply to public spaces, because I would hate to see these flags removed from this burial ground and just go planted in another one. That wouldn't be productive.
But are we denying other groups? I guess I'm confused why this is denying free speech. We don't have a policy. We're not
Right.
saying these flags are allowed and others aren't. And don't get me wrong, I would like to actually walk the burial ground and see what these flags are and understand what they are. If they're racially insensitive, then that's a whole nother story. But, you know, a Maine flag is not racially insensitive. So I guess I'm confused on why this is denying free speech. I'm confused as to why we're targeting the burial ground. I'm confused as to how these flags got there in the first place. Why are we not writing this article in a way that allows people to put flags in a way that's not offending other people, other than something that just says markers are not part of this? I don't agree with this, and I don't have enough information. I need to walk the ground and see the flags, but based on what I'm hearing today, I don't agree with this.
Did you want me to try to answer any of those
Sure.
questions?
I mean, I'm confused on several fronts.
Yeah. So flags have, let me just start from one place, and I might not be the best person to explain this, but, you know, flags have meaning, even if, you know, I'd just be light about this. If somebody puts a Starbucks flag in our downtown, somebody else would pop up and put a Dunkin' Donuts flag. I mean, this, you know, or something, you know, maybe political. These are political flags, like it or not. You know, maybe 30 years ago, they had a different meaning, but flags do have meaning. Several of these flags have been used, you know, at certain rallies, and, you know, it makes people feel uncomfortable that they're in our downtown, in a historic area, in a burial ground where they really don't need to be. They have no representation of anybody that's, you know, buried there. Now maybe that's overgeneralizing, but it's very difficult for me anyway, to make a connection. As I said, I just went back and I reviewed, you know, the hearing from last year. It's difficult for me when I see, for example, the Appeal to Heaven flag, which is the main flag. It's kind of a nice one, actually has the pine tree, but that is one that is being used, is used at the January 6th rally and is used by hate groups right now. Now, that's not to say the group putting up intends to have anything like that, but the Gadsden flag, "Don't Tread on Me," it is also, pretty contentious. There's a long history with some of these other flags as well. If you read the Supreme Court decision, actually, they talk about the Bunker Hill flag, which is the blue one with the cross, which is, a religious flag in its origin. But back in those times, many flags had crosses, right? But there's people that are even offended today who are non-Christian to see a Christian flag or a flag that has its origin in sort of Christianity. So, I mean, it's in my opinion, it's just bringing the town a lot of trouble. And the group that's putting it up may have been doing it for many years, but they have not actually sought permission. I can't quite answer why they put it up. I think there's a sense of pride in it. By the way, they do come down over the winter. So they come up in the spring and they get taken down over the winter. But I mean, I think you have to ask yourself, like, why would there be a bunch of flags in an old burial ground like that, even when it has no meaning to the public space, let's say?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I'm obviously confused by why the flags are there in the first place. If there's any symbolic or imagery on any of these flags or things that represent things that we as a town don't stand for or shouldn't stand for, I'm not in favor of keeping those things in a public place. I guess what I'm suggesting is that this is maybe too narrowly targeting specific things that some people don't like. Maybe it's a lot of people, but I guess what I would be interested in understanding is if this is going to be a blanket rule of no flags other than the United States flags, I would like to see something in here that does allow somebody to put a flag that is representative of someone buried, if it's a small flag, on their own plot because it's important to them and their family. Again, not condoning anything that's racially insensitive or anything like that, but a Maine flag, someone may have a connection to Maine for some reason and they want a little flag buried on their plot, and that's where I don't know if I agree with no flags other than the American flag being here. But it does certainly seem like there's flags there that have no business being there and that there's no rational reason why it's even in that spot in the first place.
Yeah, it would add that the last sentence of the article says that this policy doesn't apply to individual grave markers. And I think those are meant to be like those little flags that adorn the grave. So, that isn't, I think, part of this proposed proposal for policy that, if it's individual to a grave, then it can be put there. That those aren't the ones that,
Yeah.
that I'm referring to. I do see your point. I am concerned that our, let's say maybe the, first of all, who approves? I was going to say the select board, but there's a groundskeeper for the cemeteries. Does the groundskeeper approve? The chair of the select board asked last night, did you get approval to put up these flags? So, there's a question about who approves and which ones they're approving. And so we don't know if others have been denied. But it's an oddity, to be sure, that by trying to protect free speech, you're, allowing some to speak and not others. And so, you know, as I said, I think it's just easier if we just all agree on an American flag, and anybody is free to fly their flags on their own property, but prefer to take it out of the public square.
Anybody else? Any other questions? And Debbie, we talked earlier, but one thing I did look up since we talked is kind of curious what other towns had. And for me, I liked one that I think it was Hanover. And theirs is the only flags and signs authorized to be flown or placed on town property are the American flag, Massachusetts state flag, town of Hanover flag, Hanover schools flag, and the military flags at the Veterans Memorial. I think that is probably something similar to what might make sense in Southborough. But again, I think that's to Adam's point of specificity to just the old burial ground versus a town-wide policy.
Yeah, right. Then it's a public space in all town. I mean, this is just for some odd reason, it seems, in the burial ground, but they could just pass this and then they take their flag and put it somewhere else.
So Debbie, I don't know if that kind of adjustment is something you'd be willing to do to the article, or you want to keep it as is in case maybe we want to say this as an at-town meeting vote if you're looking to work on adjusting it or voting on it now. But Tim, go ahead.
Andrew, let me jump in, please. I mean, this is a non-binding article.
Yeah.
I mean, the wording, really what's being asked here is that the select board take this up. There's no boundaries placed on them regardless of what we put in the article's wording. We're basically asking them to come up with a flag policy. And that's pretty much all I see here, right? There's absolutely, it doesn't really matter what we accept or don't accept in this article, because it's not, nothing's going to happen from it if the select board doesn't want it to happen.
Correct.
So I don't think we have to debate this for hours.
Yeah, no, I think my only part is I think the reason for having these types of citizens petitions that are non-binding is to provide guidance and a town meeting vote that says, this is the direction we're looking at going. So I think the closer the article is to something, that might end being the real policy, the closer, we have to getting a real sense of whether or not that's acceptable to the town. But go ahead, Marcy.
I was just going to offer to Adam, I mean, one of the ways to possibly think about this, at least the way I'm thinking of it, is a little bit away from what flags are there and what they mean, and just really fundamentally are we, by voting, are we okay with any group in Southborough or any person in Southborough deciding that they would like to plant a flag in the premier historic asset of the town, the old burial ground, with no permission and representing whatever they see fit?
Yeah,
right, because that's basically the bottom line, regardless of what flag it is.
I completely agree, Marcy. I think it's all in the wording of this to me, as far as if you're not allowed to plant any flags unless you have permission to put a flag on the permanent flagpole, and there's a process for getting permission for doing that, except if it's a personal small flag that you want to have on your own, right? That's completely equitable to everybody. This seems targeted at specific flags that I'm not sure why we're other than what you just, I think the way Marcy worded it makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, I like that. I like that too. And I would just say this is somewhat targeted because, as far as I know, this is the only burial ground where we have these flags that keep appearing every year, despite, number of people who have verbalized that they feel offended by it. So that's why it says old burial ground. But, I would certainly support a more, general policy. You know, and just to keep in mind, we have, if you go down to the townhouse, we have several really large flagpoles with lots of flags, in addition to the war memorial and all of the flags that are lining the street. I counted, you know, like, I think 20 something. So I think, you know, being the proximity of the old burial ground to the town house and the other memorials, it seemed prudent to me just to have the one American flag, similar to what I was seeing in other burial grounds. But I would support a general policy for all public spaces, actually, as well.
Okay. Any more questions, anybody? All right, I think we did. Tim, did we have a motion and second on this one? I think so.
I think we did.
Okay. So I'm gonna go with a roll call vote. Tim,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Adam,
Nay.
Marcy,
Aye.
Howard.
Aye.
I'm going to go with nay. All right, so 4-2. Okay, and then St. Mark's Triangle. Okay.
Okay, I'll try to go through this one. Do you want me to just, you know, give a little overview of this one?
Sure. That'd be great.
This is an article to see if the town will acquire by gift a conveyance of land, which is known as St. Mark's Triangle, from St. Mark's School, authorized to the select board, and to authorize the select board to execute all documents and take any actions necessary to accomplish the acquisition. And then what follows is just the, you know, from the surveyor's map, the dimensions of the parcel. So just so that, you know, we know which piece this is speaking about. This is the entire parcel that known as the triangle. So it's from the edge of the library parking lot in the old burial ground to the sort of tip of the triangle. And that's over by where St. Mark's Street comes into Route 85. The reason I wrote this article is because I guess of the condition and the contention, I would say, over you know, what's happening down at St. Mark's right now. So, you know, don't think I have to go into the details, but if you guys don't know where this is, you know, this is an area where there's the St. Mark's Street intersection was relocated, and work was done under a grant. There's a park that's being planned, and there's a legal agreement with St. Mark's, a legal reciprocal license agreement. Last year at town meeting, you know, the town got to vote on easements, which were denied. There's been public money spent on private land, and no plans have been presented to any of the boards in town. So there's some ideas of what we think St. Mark's would like to do with that property. There's a parking lot there, and it's you know, it's been said that they, you know, are interested to keep their parking lot or expand their parking lot, but they've not been presented to any of the boards. So just to be clear, you know, there is no gift. This is a procedure, so like, it's not there right now. Maybe there would be in the future. This is a procedure that was used in a similar manner back in 1978 to acquire the land for the library parking lot. There had been negotiations for a long time. From what I understand, there's some records and some historians who've given me information. And there were negotiations going on. I believe there was first a vote that may have been having to do with eminent domain. So this is not eminent domain or anything like that. This is really, you know, asking our select board we know that there was discussion about a land swap. Andrew Dennington has mentioned that publicly on the select board. I think he's given an update to the St. Mark's Street Working Group as well. Just in thinking through this, if there are discussions going on with St. Mark's, it occurred to me, like everybody else, I don't really like the situation down there. I don't like the intersection that's been moved. I don't like that, these other things that I've mentioned, that there's agreements based on easements, which we didn't get, public money used for private purposes. And I think this the easiest way to kind of wipe the slate clean is just to acquire the entire lot. And so I would hope that, select board members that are speaking to St. Mark's would consider that. In terms of, the group that's looking to design a park, if St. Mark's were to donate the land and the entire parcel, maybe the park could be a little bit bigger. They're coming up with different features of the park that they're interested in. But I mean, to me, I don't know the vision for this. Again, St. Mark's, they've not given anything to the town. They've not approached any of the boards with any proposal. But to me, the vision is a perfect spot for us to share a space with St. Mark's. They're a partner in this, in our town. They have students, faculty, parents who are walking around. And we have also patrons of the library, people walking. This would be a perfect place for a gathering space. And some of these things that the St. Mark's Group Park are working on in terms of like coming up with sort of a gathering space. Why not make it a gathering space for all parties, for the whole town? I've not seen a better proposal. I'll be honest, as I said, there's been no proposal from St. Mark's. We have a proposal from VHB, but in terms of, for example, using any of the parcel for any particular thing, this is residential A. It's owned by St. Mark's. And, what I'm asking for in this proposal is that the town work or continue to work with St. Mark's to see if they would donate this parcel to the town for everybody's enjoyment, for their enjoyment, as well as the town's enjoyment. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right, we go around, Marcy, let me start with you.
Hey, Debbie, I don't really have any questions on this one either for you tonight. Thank you.
All right, Howard.
So we're asking to consider a negotiation for something that's not even on the table yet.
Well, I'm not sure if it's on the table. I know that there's some people that are negotiating with St. Mark's. And when the town acquired the library parking lot in 1978, this was the procedure that was used for what's called parcel A on this map. The town voted unanimously, I think, for parcel A, and 3 days later, St. Mark's donated the parcel to the town. So my hope would be if it passes at town meeting and St. Mark's sees that the town is interested in the parcel, maybe that's been discussed with them, maybe it hasn't. But if they see that the town is interested, maybe they would donate the parcel to the town, just like they did for the library parking lot.
I guess it's one way to do it. Seems backwards, but I guess it's one way to signal to St. Mark's what we want. I think it's conveniently respectfully cleaning up a mess that was already created, that if we own it, would certainly help clean up that mess. I still think it was, I guess I don't have the entire story. I guess no one really has the entire story yet of what went down with that parcel or is going down with that parcel. I remember last town meeting, it was contentious at best. I don't know. I'm on the fence with this one. I understand what you're trying to do. It seems very convenient, I'd almost like to see them offer it first and then vote for it. But I see where you're going with it. I'm skeptical. So.
All right. Eric.
So just to confirm, this is non-binding and we're just in theory voting as a town, or the representatives that show up to town meeting, that is, to say we would accept the donation of this land if St. Mark's was so gracious to give it to us, correct?
Well, there is no offer, so I can say that. I need some clarification as if this is binding or not. I mean, if they don't offer the land, you know, they don't offer it. If they do offer the land, this is how we would accept it. This is the mechanism. We would do it at town meeting. So whether it comes before or after, this is the process, and it could accept the land.
But do we quick follow? I mean, do we need this to accept the land if they come to us tomorrow and want to give it to us?
So there's my understanding is there's two mechanisms for the town to accept gifts, and one is under the Conservation Commission powers, and one is under the Historical Commission powers. And if it doesn't come to the Historical Commission or to the Conservation Commission, it comes to the town, that there would need to be this mechanism for the town to accept the property.
Didn't you need, that's assuming it's just a flat out gift. If there's
The gift.
there's been scuttlebutt of land swaps and that kind of thing, that would be something different, I'm assuming, just because you would accept this in this vote. If it came to be some kind of land swap, but still need to go back to another town meeting vote.
Yeah, that's my understanding. This is particular for this, the lot, the dimensions that are listed there, and everything from the, surveyor's map and stuff like that is particular for this whole parcel. The land swap, is my understanding, would be only part of the parcel. You've got now a road that cuts right into the parcel. Yeah, that would fall under a different mechanism.
Got it. Okay, so to boil this down, if St. Mark's decides they want to give us not a land swap or other qualification, the land, having this in place would allow us to quickly execute that without having to tag it in the next town meeting or put it to a vote, etc.
That was my thinking as well. I mean, I probably, like many people, are pretty disturbed and disgusted and everything else when you go drive by that spot and we're just not able to move forward. In my opinion, this would help. I don't think this solves all the problems. But this is something that I thought, even though it is a bit cart before the horse, maybe it would send a strong signal. I don't think St. Mark's probably likes looking at it either. And so if they were so inclined, that we could have this in place, if the town, I guess I'm an optimist, if the town votes for it, why wouldn't we accept a parcel? Maybe they would say, yeah, this would be helpful. We're willing to be your partner, and think about the use of that land. If it's a park, maybe it's a bigger park or a green space or something, that everybody could use. But yeah, the mechanism would be in place to accept the gift, is my understanding. I mean, that was the intent.
Debbie, do you know what the results were of the ground radar that was done? Questioning if there were remains under that, because that would be a significant challenge. That if that's there, then you almost can't develop this, and then it's almost like St. Mark's would be conveniently dumping their unusable property on us, and we'd be taking it, and not that we get taxes on it anyway, just it would then be our problem. So I think that's another concern of what's there and what can be done with that piece of land.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anybody in the audience that can speak to that. I can't speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding, they didn't do ground penetrating radar. What they did is an actual excavation. So they do layer by layer with an excavator and look at the ground and do some test pits and a bunch of different stuff. But they did do all their findings, and they did expand the search to a lot more land. They went over closer to the library, actually on town property, which they probably shouldn't have. But that's already been done. And they went even closer, I think, on the other side of where the new road would be, and kind of did some digging over there. My understanding is they didn't find any graves and any of those pieces, but right now it's going back to Mass Historical to make sure that there is no other pieces. So I think there's like a 2-month process to do the final report, send it to Mass Historical, and make sure they sign off, and that there's no other investigations that they need to do. But from my understanding, the preliminary findings from the team that was there was that they didn't find anything out of the ordinary.
Thanks.
But I don't know if anybody else on the call, Sam or Kevin or anybody that might have more information than I do.
Hi, this is actually Grant Farrington. I know my name is showing up as Kevin, but Grant Farrington, member of the Historical Commission and St. Mark's Street Park Working Group. Yes, Andrew, I think that was a great summary. Just a couple of things to add. My understanding from Kevin Miller, the Historical Commission Chair, what he told us was that there are 3 areas of interest on the property that what he called Greg Walber, the archaeological consulting services person who's conducting the dig, that there were 2 archaeological foundations that were found during the archaeological dig, probably from the late 1800s to early 1900s, that he didn't think were of particular historical significance. And a third, more general area, which he, I believe, referred to as a debris field. I'm not sure what exactly he found there, but that all 3 of those areas were included or will be included in his report to Mass Historical Commission. And so essentially he has 30 days to file the report to Mass Historical, and Mass Historical will have 30 days to get back to St. Mark's essentially about whether or not they have the all clear, or whether or not any of the findings, including those 3 potential red flag areas, warrant further action.
Perfect. Thanks, Grant.
Thanks.
All right. Any more questions? Debbie, one thing I did notice, I don't know if it really matters, but in the article, the page, the book number is off. I think it's supposed to be 451, Plan 43, and it's listed as 453. I don't think that matters. It just might be something to, I don't know if town council, like if that was off, if it was binding or not. I don't know. I'm just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't realize that. Thanks.
Yeah, no worries. I tried to look it up and couldn't find it, then looked it up by name and found it.
Typo.
Yep. So I think, if the town can get more land from St. Mark's, I think obviously that would be great. I think St. Mark's was looking more for a land swap when this discussion was done, because they do use the area for parking. So, if we could get this donated by St. Mark's, I think that would be great. But I think, a land swap is probably more to what they probably were originally thinking and would be, willing to do. But it doesn't hurt to ask, I guess, and doesn't hurt to have this pre-approved if they decided to give us the whole thing. But that's just my 2 cents.
Thanks.
All right, I don't think we have a motion on this one. What number is this? Do we have Do we have a motion for advisory to support Article 13 in the 9/21/22 warrant?
So moved.
Second,
Okay, any discussion? All right, roll call vote. Tim,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Adam,
Aye.
Marcy,
aye.
Howard,
Nay.
and I'm going to go nay. 4-2. All right. Thank you,
Thank
Debbie.
you. Yep, thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for hanging on.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, well, we are all done with our votes. Thank you, everybody. Stop sharing that. And any other business properly brought forth? Does anybody have any new business or anything they wanted to cover? I don't have anything else. All right, public comment. Does anybody from the public have a comment? All right. Seeing none, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
All right. Roll call vote. Tim,
Aye.
Adam,
Aye.
Marcy,
aye.
Howard,
Aye.
and Eric,
Aye.
and I. All right, 6-0. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Andrew.
I all.